So before we look at any details of the new Trimble X9 laser scanner and the new functionality within Trimble Business Centre, I would like to attempt to set the scene within the industry to justify why Trimble are moving in the direction they are by investing in developing new scanning technology and industry-leading scan data extraction tools. So a long-standing industry trend is the moving away from discrete data collection towards mass data collection. So discrete data collection is where the surveyor or the field operator, using traditional equipment such as total stations or GNSS receivers, decides on the salient features to be collected in the field, and they measure that information. Mass data collection is where we gather massive amounts of data in the field, and all the information extraction is done in the office. The end deliverable does not need to change. So here we're seeing a traditional survey deliverable, but it's coming from scan data. So examples of this mass data collection would be traditional aerial photogrammetry and LiDAR. Aerial photogrammetry has been around since World War I. LiDAR, of course, is a more recent development. We see mobile mapping becoming more and more mainstream. UAV photogrammetry, many of the people here in our open day are using this technology day to day. UAV LiDAR, again, we're seeing it becoming more mainstream. We've got railway trolley scanning, which is essentially a non-motorized mobile mapping, very commonly used today. And of course, terrestrial laser scanning. Laser scanning is the de facto way to tackle building elevations and floor plans these days. But what we have not seen so much is of them being used for traditional topographic surveys. However, I don't believe that anyone here does not believe that generally mass data collection is the way the whole industry is going, but also that specifically laser scanning will become an increasingly valid way to tackle topographic surveys. The only argument we would have would be timescales. So with that in mind, what we would like to look at now is today, what are the pros and cons of using laser scanners for topographic surveys versus a more traditional approach. So we have a shorter time on site. So we're maybe scanning something for a very short period of time compared to being on site for a much longer period of time if we're using things like total stations and GNSS receivers. And obviously, if we're reducing our site time, we're reducing fuel bills if we're going to a site just once as opposed to maybe five times for 5 days work. If we associated costs with accommodation, things like traffic management, which all of these things are becoming more and more expensive. So we're reducing the cost of our exposure to be on site. We've got the ability to sell enhanced deliverables. So these could be point clouds, they could be fly-throughs, they could be textured meshes, but we have the ability to basically get additional revenue from what we can produce for our clients. We've got data consistency. And what I mean by this is something that used to trouble me when I was surveying many years ago, is occasionally a client would pull us up and where we've got a topographic survey being extracted or being surveyed, and then we hand over a building elevation. And because they've been done as two separate techniques, there might be slight differences in sizes depending on where the data has been extracted from, whether it's coming from the elevation or the topographic survey. Now, hopefully that should be small. However, here, if we're extracting everything from the same source, then we should have full consistency in our data set. What we also have is if we're actually giving the extra deliverable, for instance, a point cloud, then when we compare it to the extracted topographic survey, because that topographic survey is coming from the point cloud, then we have consistency in the data. Another point. A lot of the time, companies are scanning the data anyway. So many clients are requesting topographic surveys and building elevations. Well, why not get everything, extract data for the building elevations that are coming from the laser scanner and extract it from your topo from the laser scanner data as well. Safety. We're seeing clients becoming more and more concerned. We're seeing survey companies becoming more and more concerned about the safety of their staff and having to prove that they're doing everything possible to keep their staff in a safe location. Well, these sort of situations here, the busy road junctions that I used to run around 20 odd years ago, if we can scan it from a place of safety and extract it back in the office, it's a much safer way to approach the survey. And it's something we can demonstrate to our clients that it's a safer approach. Comprehensive. So what I mean by this is that we're basically mining the data. So as the client is asking for more information or their needs are changing, we're not going back to site, we're going back to the data and we're extracting more and more information from that same data set that we collected at the start. Security. Thankfully, it's not a major concern in Scotland, but the thefts of robotic total stations are becoming generally more common. There's certainly locations that I would not want to set up a robotic total station. Well, if I'm deciding to scan it, then I'm standing right beside the scanner at all times and the instrument is very secure. It is a true single person operation. There's no requirement for any second person to be doing a scanning project. We have the argument of limited access. So a lot of the time, it's difficult to get into things like people's gardens to be able to survey building footprints. Well, if I'm scanning it from a remote location, I don't need access, and we can extract all the information without actually needing to get into that location. Maybe slightly more controversially, something that people have to certainly be a little bit careful with, but it does give us the option of actually outsourcing the information extraction from the laser scan data. So if we're hitting a busy period, we could potentially put the extraction of the topographic survey data from the laser scan data to a third party. When that's happening, that certainly gives us the ability to see the deliverable much better. So we can basically extract the 3D topographic survey, compare it to the point cloud, and it allows us to very quickly QC that data. What I mean by this, if most of the work becomes office work, it's easier to manage, is that if we're overrunning, it's easier to pass a half-process survey from the office over to somebody else, as opposed to basically having a half-finished topographic survey in the field, passing that over to someone else. So it's easier to sort of move the processing around an office compared to between surveyors on site. There's less equipment. If our site time is reduced to 20% of what it was with traditional equipment, then potentially we need less equipment. So there's a saving there. We're not having to revisit the site when the client asks for more data, but we still charge for that data. We're not going to hand it over for free. Something quite a few of our customers have been speaking to us about recently is concerning the challenges of recruitment. So how do we get young people into our industry? And it would seem that many of our customers are saying that they're getting younger people into the industry. They're spending 2 or 3 years getting trained up, and then they're leaving. And they're leaving the industry. They're not leaving for another post at another survey company. And it would seem to be that one of the main challenges is that younger people today a lot of younger people today don't necessarily want to be out in the field for the majority of their job. If we, using scanning workflows, are moving most of the work back into the office, then that seems to be more attractive to a younger generation. And that is another argument we can use. But there are challenges. So one of the major challenges with scanning, of course, is you can only survey what you can see. So where we've got grass, we've got manhole covers that are far away from the scanner, or we've got backs of walls that are on the lee side, if you like, of the scanner, then we can't get that data. We can't extract a position if we don't have any data. On the ground, we can't identify a cover. We have shadow at the back of the walls. Challenges of leaving control. So how do we leave control if our entire workflow has been done by scanning? So we're seeing people leaving sort of permanent checkerboard targets on site. But that's something that we need to find a solution to. How do we leave control when everything's been done by scanning? Data management, it's something that I hear mentioned. To be perfectly honest, I don't put a huge weight in it. Is how much data are we producing? Well, every single survey company is needing to manage its data. The fact that the files are a little bit bigger shouldn't not be a major problem, and data storage is extremely cheap. Weather. So traditionally, scanning has been very difficult to do in bad weather. With the new developments coming from Trimble, then we can pretty much scan in any weather. So the latest X7, X9, we can scan in any weather. It does mean, of course, our data may be impacted, especially if we're looking for colorization. It's not going to be so good if we're doing that in very wet weather, but we can continue to work in bad weather. So it's not so much of the problem as it's been in the past. And then one of the major issues is how much time there is before we can actually start working in the data. And once again, with the latest developments in the X7 and the X9, we're seeing that time before we can actually start extracting the information is much reduced because we're doing the registration in the field. And then how do we efficiently extract the topographic data from scan data? And that's something that's been lacking, but that is something where Trimble have been spending a huge amount of money. And today what we'll do during the course of this open day is we'll look at some of the information extraction tools within Trimble Business Centre in a fairly deep degree.